Hello, Greg DeLoach here. I'm the Dean of the McAfee School of Theology at Mercer University, and you've met Francis. Together we co-teach a course named Death and Dying, and while we talk a lot about a lot of great and interesting stuff, and when you think about it, everybody's interested in talking about death. They don't want to talk about their own death, but they're okay talking about death because it is something we all share in common. And it's something I think that's worth diving deep into. And as obvious as it is to say the word death, like we all know what we're talking about, would you believe that we continue to debate about, well, what do we mean by death? And scientists do debate these things. What does it mean? What do we mean by life? And what do we mean by death? And it has legal consequences to the extent that back in 1980, the Uniform Determination of Death Act was passed to help our country, and largely it's shared around the globe, about a shared understanding of what do we mean by dead. When are you dead? And it's 45 years old, and it's still debated, and there's still room for debate, but that's what we're kind of leaning on about how do we define death. And basically, according to this act, death is defined by one of two things happening. I want to read it to you. One, either the irreversible cessation of circulatory and respiratory functions. Basically, your heart stops and it won't start again on its own. And so when your heart stops, your breathing stops, you're dead. Or the irreversible cessation of all functions of the entire brain, including the brain stem, is dead. So you've heard the phrase, they're brain dead. So your brain stops and it can't be started again. Either one of these. And you think, clear enough. All right, that's a great understanding of dead. When that happens, you're dead. Well, technology, right? It complicates things to the extent of it can keep the body alive. And so you have some complexities about, is this a living corpse or a dead body? And what do we do about this? And so it's interesting that medical students, for example, they begin their understanding of caring for the living by working on a cadaver, a dead body. One physician philosopher by the name of Jeffrey Bishop published a book, marvelous book, by the way, The Anticipatory Corpse. And in it, he argues that therein lies the problem. We look at bodies in strictly the materialistic lenses. That is, it's a machine, and all we need to do is change the parts until we run out of parts. And when we run out of parts, then the body is no longer functionally good. And so we create these complexities in the ICUs and other corridors of the hospital, so to speak, in which a body is being kept alive for the purposes, good purposes I might add, of harvesting organs. And that is the terminology. Harvesting, I guess the more sanitized version is procuring organs that can be used for those who otherwise their lives would be close to ending. Again, noble purposes, but you run into some ethical questions here. When is a person actually dead? If we can keep their heart beating and their respiration through a ventilator to keep that moving forward, is a person alive or dead? Which is it? And when a person is brain dead but yet kept alive by artificial means, they can still go through other things that affect the living. And so the question is still worth exploring. When is someone actually dead? We're going to explore some of those in the course. And what does this mean? Because I think that when we dig a little bit deeper, it helps us understand a bit more about how technology both gives us opportunities, but can also give us complexities. Now, why does any of this matter? I think it matters because if we're working alongside others who are in these liminal spaces like an ICU room, these are very real questions that they may have to encounter, that they may need to engage. And I will tell you, there are no easy answers to this. One ethicist by the name of Peter Singer argues that death is when consciousness or irreversible consciousness ceases. In other words, when we're no longer conscious and we can no longer regain consciousness, one is truly dead. Of course, the problem is you can keep the body alive, and who are we to define what is consciousness and what is not? This matters because it could relate to elderly who, due to disease, brain diseases in particular, such as dementia, can rob them of a sense of self, and we think that are they really there or not? But who are we to grade when one person is more or less human than another? It can create, I think, some slippery slopes. And the theologian in us all, that is, as we reflect on where is God in all of this, it's important for us to reflect and to try to come to grips with what we mean by this. And so as we look at what we mean and define by death, we'll explore some of these ethicists and what they have to say in that. Due to the continuation of such technologies, we need to, I think, re-examine about how we define death. It needs to be updated. They met recently 3 years ago to debate this very issue. And would you believe they could come to no conclusion and had to stop the meeting after an entire summer of dedicated to this? Well, we'll look at the physicality of death and what it looks like. We'll explore about the signs of death, the death rattle, which comes when the breathing becomes labored, the delirium, the myoclonus, the seizures and such. There are ways in which you can look and see that death is coming, but death is also something that comes up to us suddenly. If all of this death talk is too depressing for you, don't worry. We're going to explore this in a way that I think is also approachable. I said this in the last video. When we begin to examine more deeply about what death is, it forces us, I think, to reflect more carefully about what life is and what a great gift it is to just simply be alive and to remind yourself that's the same goal as the people all around you. We just want to know that we have life. And remember, at the risk of sounding like a preacher, it was Jesus who told us, I have come that you may have life and have it more abundantly. And I think that accompanies us as we walk through even the valley of the shadow of death. For thou art with me. Indeed, it is true. It's always been true. So, look forward to seeing you in class.